Everybody knows the Toyota is bulletproof, the Honda is reliable, and the Nissan is junk. Past 200,000 miles, it's almost backwards. One of these lives or dies on a $23 part. One is being killed on purpose by a feature the factory bolted on. And the one everybody throws away is the one I'd put my own money on. Subscribe, because that $23 fix alone could save your engine. Here's what actually holds up. Toyota, the 2GR. Let's start with the Toyota, because it's the one wearing the halo. The 2GR ran in the Camry, the Highlander, the Avalon, the Sienna, the RAV4, and half the Lexus lineup. And I'll hand it credit right up front. The bottom end on this engine is the real deal. Forged steel crankshaft, forged connecting rods, a timing chain down low instead of a rubber belt, nothing in there waiting to snap and grenade the motor. There's one more quiet advantage. The older 2GR sprays its fuel into the intake ports, right onto the back of the intake valves, and that keeps them washed clean. So you skip the baked-on carbon problem the direct injection engines fight, the one where deposits pile up on the valve stems until the airflow chokes and somebody's quoting you a walnut blast. These cross 300,000 miles with nobody ever opening the bottom end, so the legend is earned. But it's earned down low, because the second you climb up out of that bottom end, the 2GR starts handing you bills. Here's the one that should scare you. On engines built through April 2008, Toyota ran an oil feed line to the variable valve timing actuator with a rubber section sitting right where the hot engine cooks it. Toyota's own campaign paperwork says exactly why it fails. Corrosive gases from the PCV system eat a pinhole in that rubber, and over time the pinhole opens up, and when it lets go, it doesn't seat. It dumps your entire oil supply onto the pavement in about 30 seconds. Sit with that number for a second. 30 seconds is not enough time to react, and your oil light doesn't warn you. It comes on when the pressure is already gone. So by the time you see it, look down and get to the shoulder, your bearings have been running dry at highway RPM. That's not a repair. That's a replacement engine on a car that was perfect 90 seconds ago. Toyota ran a service campaign on close to 1 million V6 trucks and sedans over this exact part. And here's the word they used: limited service campaign, not a recall. They stated flat out it wasn't a safety recall, so no defect report went to the federal government. Think about what that gets them. A safety recall means federal reporting and a permanent public record that follows the vehicle. A limited service campaign is a letter in your mailbox, and it expires. They eventually stretched this one out to the end of 2021, and Lexus had to extend its own version separately because roughly 30,000 cars never came in before the first deadline ran out. But here's the part that makes me grind my teeth. The replacement hose Toyota handed out in that campaign was still rubber. Owners have documented those replacement hoses letting go within 20,000 miles of the campaign repair, on cars serviced every 5,000 miles like clockwork, and then the dealer refusing to cover the engine that died with it. And the whole time, Toyota was already putting an all-metal line on the Lexus versions and on everything built after April 2008. That metal pipe is about $23. $23 to keep your bulletproof Toyota from emptying its oil onto the freeway. If you own one of these, pop the hood, look behind the oil fill cap, and if there's rubber on that line, swap it before you drive another mile. And if you already had the campaign done years ago, that doesn't clear you. Go look at what they actually put on there. The oil line isn't the only soft spot. The front timing cover is sealed with silicone instead of a gasket, and past 100,000 miles, a lot of them start weeping. Toyota changed the sealant in production around 2010, which tells you they knew. A small leak you just keep an eye on, but when it needs a real reseal, that cover is buried behind the timing chain and the accessory drive, and on the front wheel drive models, the engine basically has to come out to reach it. That's $2,600 at an independent shop, $5,000 or $6,000 at a dealer. On the engine, everybody swears is maintenance free, and it keeps stacking. The water pump is a wear item, and on the hybrid Highlander, the factory wants the engine pulled to change it, which is insane for a water pump. The variable timing solenoid is another $300 to $400 when it acts up. The ignition coils are a when, not an if. None of that is scary money on its own. It just keeps showing up on the engine you were told would never ask you for anything. And there's one more, and it's the newest, so almost nobody warns you about it. The updated 2GR that arrived in 2015, the one in the Tacoma, the Highlander, the Camry, the Lexus RX, went to a combined port and direct injection setup with a piston carrying tiny oil drainback holes in the piston lands. Those holes gum up with varnish and sludge, especially on long oil intervals or cheap oil. When they plug, the oil control ring seizes in its groove. Oil goes up into the chamber, blow-by climbs, and the cylinder walls get scored. Now here's what makes that one so much worse than it sounds. There's a teardown of a 2017 Tacoma engine showing deep scoring on the middle cylinders of both banks, and this block uses thin cast iron liners cast into the aluminum as a single unit. Toyota's own engineering documentation says a block built that way cannot be rebored. Read that again. On the older 2GR, a scored cylinder is a trip to the machine shop. On this one, a scored cylinder means the block is scrap. There are examples knocking under 70,000 miles, and Toyota quietly redrew that piston in 2018, which tells you everything about whether they knew. So my honest read on the Toyota, the inside of the older one is the strongest bottom end in this entire comparison, and nothing else here touches it out to 250,000 miles, but it is not the no maintenance tank the badge promises. That oil line is a real danger until you fix it, and on a 2015 through 2018, I'd put a borescope down every cylinder before I trusted a dime to it. 20 minutes that tells you whether you're buying a 250,000 mile engine or a scrap block. So the Toyota wins on the inside and nickels you on the outside. Hang on to that, because the Honda flips the whole thing around. Honda, the J35. The Honda has good guts too. Then Honda found a way to wreck it on purpose. The J35 lived in the Pilot, the Odyssey, the Accord, the Ridgeline, and the Acura MDX. On paper, it's a great motor. Strong rotating assembly, solid design. The kind of engine that should shrug off 300,000 miles. But somewhere in there, the fuel economy department got their hands on it and bolted on variable cylinder management. Here's what it actually does. To squeeze out a little better mileage, VCM cuts fuel and spark to a bank of cylinders while you're cruising, and clamps both valves shut to trap a cushion of air. Sounds clever on a brochure, but those dead pistons are still pumping up and down in their bores, and with the valves shut, every downstroke pulls a vacuum above the piston, and that vacuum drags oil straight past the rings, and it feeds itself. A cylinder that isn't firing cools off. A cold ring seals worse than a hot one, so more oil gets passed, which cools it further, which lets more oil past. On a 2-hour highway run, that loop just keeps going. Do that for 60, 80, 100,000 miles, and the rings glaze over and the engine starts drinking oil. A full quart every 1,000 miles in the bad ones. And Honda had the nerve to put that in writing as normal consumption, and it doesn't end at oil. That's the part people miss. When the dead cylinder wakes back up, it fires cold through a plug that's already soaked, so it burns dirty and lays down more deposits. That's why you see the same misfire codes over and over on cylinders 1 through 4, while 5 and 6 stay spotless. All that unburned oil goes downstream and cooks the catalytic converter, and a Honda Cat runs $800 to $2,000 depending on your state. And because running half a V6 as an inline 3 shakes like you'd expect, Honda fights the vibration with electronically controlled hydraulic engine mounts. Mounts that fail on their own cost around $400 each, and owners report replacing every 50,000 miles. One feature, and it comes after your rings, your plugs, your cats, and your mounts all at once. It got bad enough that Honda caught a class action over more than 1.5 million vehicles, 2008 to 2012, Accord, 2008 to 2013 Odyssey, 2009 to 2013 Pilot, and the Cross Tour. They settled, reimbursed repairs, and stretched the warranty to 8 years from the purchase date, and they denied the allegations the whole way through. They changed the piston rings in 2014. Now here's how you know that change didn't fix anything. In June 2025, more than a decade later, Honda announced another warranty extension, this time on certain 2013 to 2015 Pilots and 2013 to 2017 Odysseys. Same failure, on vehicles built after the supposed fix. All that 2014 revision did was push the problem far enough down the road that most of those trucks were out of warranty by the time it showed its face. And picture where that leaves the owner. Well-maintained Odyssey, 90,000 miles. Dealer serviced its whole life. Check engine light. Cylinder 2 misfire. The dealer confirms it's the known VCM failure and quotes north of $5,000 for rings and plugs. The settlement claim window closed years ago and nobody ever mailed them anything because they bought it used. Honda declines goodwill, warranties expired. That's the whole trap. The defect outlives the remedy because the remedy was always a date on a calendar instead of a fix to the design. But here's where I save you $4,000, so stick with me. When one of these limps in with a fouled cylinder, the dealer wants $3,500 to $4,200 to tear it down and re-ring it, and closer to $6,000 if the bores are already scored. You do not have to play that game. There's a little controller people call a VCM disabler. Runs you somewhere between $100 and $300. Here's the trick to it. It feeds the computer a coolant temperature about 10 degrees below normal operating temp, and the ECU won't shut cylinders down on an engine it thinks hasn't warmed up yet. So VCM never engages. Plug it in. The engine runs on all 6 all day long, and the oil burning stops getting worse. There's a version with a CARB executive order if you get emissions tested, and most of them pull off in a few minutes if you're taking it in under warranty. Catch it early, and that little part is the line between a Honda that dies at 150,000 and one that just keeps going. Catch it late, after the plugs have been fouling for 30,000 miles, and the disabler stops the bleeding but it won't unglaze what's already glazed. Somewhere in between, a piston soak will sometimes free the rings up for a fraction of what a ring job costs. Try that before you let anybody start pulling heads. One more thing people forget on these, and for once, it isn't VCM. The J35 runs a timing belt, not a chain, and it's an interference engine, which is mechanic talk for this. If that belt snaps, the valves and the pistons meet, and the engine is scrap. Honda wants it changed every 7 years or 105,000 miles, water pump included. And the 7 years matters as much as the miles, because rubber ages sitting in a driveway. Skip it to save a few hundred and you can turn a running engine into a boat anchor in one afternoon. And don't think this is only an old engine headache. In November 2023, Honda recalled around 249,000 vehicles because the machines cutting the crankshafts were set up wrong, leaving the connecting rod journals out of spec, which chews up the rod bearings until the engine seizes solid. Honda admitted 1 to 450 warranty claims and had been quietly analyzing it internally since then. In November 2024, federal investigators opened a query after 173 owners reported that exact same failure in vehicles the recall never covered. And in August 2025, they escalated it to a full preliminary evaluation across roughly 1.4 million Honda and Acura vehicles. 2016 to 2020, Pilot and MDX, 2018 to 2020, Odyssey and TLX, 2017 to 2019, Ridgeline. Over 400 reports of complete engine failure at NHTSA. Honda's own internal count is near 2,600. And here's the line that should stop you cold. The agency stated the evidence does not point to the same crankshaft defect the 2023 recall covered, which means it's a second, separate problem in the same engine family. Still open, with at least one reported crash. So the Honda V6 is a strong engine wrapped around 2 different ways of killing itself. One old, one new. My take on the Honda is rough, and I'll stand on it all day. The engine underneath is good. What Honda strapped to it is not. Never buy one of these without a disabler already on it, or a firm plan to bolt one on the day you drive it home. And on a 2016 through 2020, run your VIN against that open investigation before you sign anything. Now let me tell you why the engine everybody calls garbage is the one I'd actually put my own money on. Nissan, the VQ35. The Nissan 3.5 is the VQ35, and it ran in the Maxima, the Altima, the Murano, the Pathfinder, the Quest, the 350 Zeek, and the Infiniti G35, FX35, and M35. It's got a reputation as an oil burner, as junk, as proof Nissan lost its way. And for the early version, that reputation is mostly fair. So let me be straight about the bad one first. The early VQ35, the one they call the DE, had 2 problems stacked right on top of each other. 1, the factory piston rings were weak and the valve stem seals hardened with age, so a lot of these drank oil from early in their lives. 2, the little precats sit up close to the engine where they run hot, and the ceramic honeycomb inside them crumbles and gets pulled back up into the cylinders where it scratches the walls like somebody poured sand down the intake, and once that starts, it feeds itself. Scored walls burn more oil. More oil kills the cat faster. More cat debris scores the walls, round and round. Mechanics still argue about which one is really doing the damage. Doesn't matter, the result is the same. These things burn oil. And the worst of the bunch, the high-output rev-up manual cars from 2005 and 2006, would go through a quart every couple hundred miles. Nissan revised the rings in 2004, and there was a class action settlement on the 350Z in Maxima with a warranty extension. The Tel's owners learned to watch for are oil pooling in the spark plug tubes and a pitot sur 420 catalyst code showing up before you ever see smoke. So yes, the early one earned every bit of its bad name. But here's the twist, and this is the hill I'll die on. In 2007, Nissan reworked this engine into the version they call the HR, and the HR is a completely different animal. Raised deck height and longer connecting rods, which cuts the side loading that wears cylinder walls in the first place, a ladder frame lower block that stiffens the whole bottom end, timing control added on the exhaust side, not just the intake, reinforced valve springs, bigger valves, lighter pistons, equal length headers, and a red line that climbs to 7,500. They fixed the rings. And the oil consumption conversation that eats every DE forum alive? On the later cars, it barely comes up. That's the part almost nobody bothered to update their opinion on. The same engine family everybody writes off as trash quietly turned into one of the better V6 of its era, and the reputation never caught up. I'd take a clean VQ35 HR over a Pilot with VCM any day of the week, and I already know that one sentence just made somebody slam their keyboard. Go ahead. Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. Now the HR isn't flawless, so here's your buying tip, and this is the one thing on this engine that can truly hurt it. Behind the front cover there are oil gallery gaskets, and the early builds used a weak paper material that warps and lets your oil pressure bleed off internally. You'll see it as Pagino 11 and Pagino 21 cam timing codes, and Bibles and Bave 5224 for low oil pressure. People chase cam solenoids and sensors for months before somebody finally pulls that cover. The steel replacement gaskets cure it for good, and the kit is cheap. The labor to get in there is the real money, which is exactly why you do it during a timing job instead of as its own visit. And on any VQ, the timing chain guides and tensioners start rattling on cold starts past 150,000 miles. 1 to 3 seconds of rattle on a cold morning is the classic signature. That's a refresh, not a funeral. Nissan also likes the valve shims checked around every 60,000 miles, though in the real world, they usually stay quiet a lot longer than that. Here's the kicker on value. A good used VQ35 out of a yard runs $400 to $700 because nobody wants them, which means a full timing refresh on one of these, chains, guides, tensioners, gaskets, costs less than the diagnostic fee on some German V6, and the whole car is cheap for the same reason. The reputation crushed the resale value on an engine Nissan fixed almost 20 years ago. If you're shopping a DE, run a compression test and pull the plugs before you hand over a cent, and look for oil in those plug tubes. On an HR, listen for the cold start rattle, check the oil pressure, and scan for P211 and P221. Do that, and the so-called junk engine will quietly outlast half the cars sitting in traffic next to it. So there it is, 3 engines. 3.5 liters each. 3 completely different ways of growing old. Let me give it to you straight. The older Toyota 2GR takes it for the longest haul, and it isn't close. Nothing else here has internals built like it. Just go in knowing you're buying a great engine with an expensive oil leak somewhere in its future, and a $23 part you check the same day you get the keys. And do not assume the newest version is the same beast. On that one, a scored cylinder isn't a rebuild. It's a new block. The Honda is the heartbreaker of the group. Underneath all that VCM nonsense is a motor that should have walked away with this. Instead, it's the one that drains the most money out of people because the thing killing it is the thing Honda installed on purpose. And in 2025, they extended the warranty again instead of redesigning it. Unplug VCM and it climbs right back into the fight. Leave it the way it came, and it's a repair bill on a timer, with a federal investigation into 1.4 million of the newer ones sitting on top. And the Nissan is the one I want you to go back and rethink. The early DE has earned your side eye, no argument, but the HR is the sleeper of this whole comparison, and you can grab one for Nissan money instead of Toyota money. That's the value play nobody talks about, because everybody is still mad at an engine from 2004 that Nissan replaced in 2007. The badge on the hood tells you almost nothing about what's actually inside. The cheap part you check on day one decides more than the brand ever will. So tell me, which of these 3 has actually gone the distance for you? And did I get the Nissan wrong? Drop it in the comments, I read everyone. Next, the engines that run forever until one cheap part quietly kills them. Thanks for watching.